Morning sunlight spilled across the polished kitchen counter, glinting off the rim of a half-empty coffee cup. The aroma was warm, comforting, almost deceptive. Samantha watched the steam rise, tracing idle circles on the cup's edge while her husband scrolled through his phone across the table. Between them sat silence, thick, habitual, and strangely polite. David cleared his throat, the faintest sound of acknowledgement. "You've got that meeting today, right?" His voice was flat, the tone of someone asking out of duty, not interest. "Yes," she replied softly. He didn't look up. The conversation ended before it began. It wasn't always this way. Once, they'd filled mornings with laughter and whispered plans, lazy kisses stolen between sips of coffee. Now, every gesture felt rehearsed, every glance a performance for a life neither seemed eager to leave nor truly live. 7 years of marriage had dulled the edges of passion, sanding them into something functional but hollow. Samantha studied him, the familiar slope of his shoulders, the faint crease between his brows. He was still handsome in a quiet way, dependable, steady. But his steadiness had become a wall she couldn't climb. She had tried dinners, weekend trips, soft invitations to talk. Each attempt met the same indifferent smile and a promise of later. Later never came. Her phone buzzed, a notification from a group chat, a meaningless flurry of messages. Yet, the tiny vibration felt like a heartbeat, a reminder that the world outside their house still existed. Lately, she'd found comfort there, in attention from strangers, in compliments on photos, in brief sparks of validation that her husband no longer offered. She told herself it wasn't disloyalty. It was survival. After David left for work, the house felt cavernous. His absence didn't create loneliness, it simply revealed it. Samantha wandered to the mirror in the hallway and stared at her reflection. Her beauty hadn't faded, if anything, it had matured, but something deeper had dimmed behind her eyes. She wondered when that spark had gone out, and whether anyone had noticed. The memory came uninvited, their anniversary dinner 2 months ago. She'd worn his favorite dress. He'd checked his phone between courses. Later that night, when she reached for him, he'd turned away, murmuring that he was tired. She'd lain awake beside him, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, feeling like a ghost in her own bed. That was the night she stopped believing effort could save them. Now, as the morning light shifted, she straightened her blouse and picked up her phone. A new message appeared, unknown number, polite introduction, a name she faintly recognized from a mutual friend. Marcus. She hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, then locked her phone without replying. Still, as she walked out the door, his name echoed faintly in her mind, unsettlingly warm. The perfect lie, she thought, wasn't pretending to love him. It was pretending she still believed that love was enough. The message stayed unread for 2 days. Samantha told herself it didn't matter, that she was simply too busy to respond. But each time her phone lit up, a part of her hoped it was him again. When she finally opened it, the words were brief and harmless. "It was nice seeing you at the event last week. I hope work hasn't been too cruel." Polite, safe. Still, something about the message lingered. She typed a simple, "Thanks, been hectic as always," and sent it before she could change her mind. That was all it took. The exchange grew slowly, like a vine creeping up a neglected wall. Texts about work turned into jokes, jokes into confessions about sleepless nights and half-kept dreams. Marcus had a way of writing that felt intimate even in the smallest words. He noticed things, how she phrased her sentences, the hesitation in her replies, the silences she didn't explain. He asked about her favorite books, her music, the last time she felt genuinely happy. No one had asked her that in years. Nights became longer. She'd lie beside David, his back turned, while her phone glowed faintly under the sheets. Marcus's words filled the darkness where her husband's silence used to live. Their conversations were never overtly romantic, yet each carried an undercurrent neither acknowledged. It wasn't about desire, not yet. It was about being seen. She began dressing with more intention. Nothing dramatic, just subtle changes, lip gloss, perfume, the soft click of heels instead of flats. David didn't notice, but when Marcus commented that she looked radiant in a photo from a friend's dinner, her pulse quickened. She told herself it was innocent, but innocence had started to feel irrelevant. Weeks passed. They spoke every day. The sound of her phone became a secret melody. She learned that Marcus was confident but not arrogant, flirtatious without pressure. He listened in a way David never had, responding not just to her words but to what lingered between them. One evening, rain pressed against the windows while David worked late again. Samantha sat alone on the couch, scrolling through old messages. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the black screen between texts, a woman teetering between loyalty and longing. A new message appeared, "I'm nearby. Coffee." Her breath caught. The rational part of her hesitated, the part that still clung to moral order. But curiosity, no, hunger, overruled it. She typed back before she could reason herself out of it, just for a little while. The cafe was dimly lit, half empty, quiet except for the low hum of jazz. Marcus stood as she entered, smile soft but knowing. They talked as if they'd known each other for years. When his hand brushed hers reaching for a napkin, electricity shot through her veins. It was nothing more than a touch, barely a moment, yet it felt like crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. As she walked away later, rain falling around her, she realized she was no longer lonely. She was terrified. End of section 2, 500 words. The first time happened by accident, at least that's what Samantha told herself afterward. A harmless coffee turned into dinner, dinner into a drive, the drive into his apartment, and then there was no longer a line to cross. The air between them was thick with something neither could name, and by the time Marcus kissed her, resistance was a memory. It wasn't love, it was release. For months, Samantha had been drowning in quiet despair, and now every touch pulled her closer to the surface. Marcus was warmth, laughter, danger, a sharp contrast to David's steady coldness. In his arms, she felt seen, even worshipped. For a few hours, she could forget the guilt clawing at the edges of her mind. She left his apartment before dawn, her reflection in the car window a stranger's face. The city lights blurred behind streaks of rain as her heart hammered in her chest. She promised herself it was a mistake, a single lapse born of loneliness. But mistakes have gravity. They pull, they repeat. Days passed, and she tried to resume her old rhythm, work, home, routine, but nothing fit anymore. David's voice grated against her nerves. His questions, once tolerable, now sounded like intrusions. The life she had built with him felt like a performance she could no longer memorize. Then Marcus called again. Their second meeting wasn't an accident. The third was inevitable. Soon, she wasn't waiting for him to reach out, she was initiating it. Every encounter blurred her boundaries further. Each time she told herself it would be the last, and each time she found herself standing at his door again, heart racing, excuses already rehearsed. What began as escape became addiction. The thrill of secrecy, the rush of being wanted, it wasn't Marcus himself she craved, but the transformation he caused within her. He made her feel young, reckless, alive. But even that euphoria began to fade. One night, after he fell asleep beside her, she lay awake listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. It was the same sound David made, the same ordinary proof of existence, and suddenly, she felt nothing. The magic had vanished, replaced by a hollow ache. Marcus was no savior, he was simply another man. And that terrified her more than anything. In the weeks that followed, she sought that spark elsewhere, flirtations with strangers, glances exchanged with colleagues, attention that filled the emptiness Marcus no longer could. Her guilt dulled with repetition, her conscience eroded quietly, like paper under rain. The title she would never dare to say aloud began to haunt her thoughts. One black man wasn't enough. It wasn't about race or passion, it was about the hunger itself, the unending need to feel something real. But every encounter only left her more hollow, more dependent on the illusion of control. By the time she realized what she'd become, it was already too late. She had turned her loneliness into a weapon, and now it was pointed at herself. Morning crept into the bedroom like an unwelcome witness. The sheets were cold on Samantha's side of the bed. David hadn't returned home the night before. The silence, once comforting, now felt like punishment. She sat upright, dizzy with the weight of what she'd done, though she could no longer tell which betrayal had finally exposed her. Maybe it was a forgotten message. Maybe a careless perfume. Maybe David had simply stopped pretending not to notice. Her phone lay face down on the nightstand. She didn't dare touch it. Messages from Marcus, and others, blinked faintly beneath the screen, fragments of a life she no longer recognized. By mid-afternoon, David came home. He didn't shout. He didn't demand explanations. He walked past her, his expression unreadable, and began packing a suitcase. The dull sound of zippers filled the air. Samantha tried to speak, but the words withered in her throat. What could she say? That she had been lonely. That she had needed to feel alive. Every justification sounded like a lie. David, please. Her voice cracked, barely a whisper. He paused for a moment, then looked at her, not with anger, but with something far worse, indifference. I don't even know who you are anymore. The door closed behind him with a finality that echoed long after the sound had faded. For the first time, the house felt too big, too quiet, too honest. Samantha wandered through it like a trespasser, every room a reminder of what she'd destroyed. The mirror in the hallway caught her reflection again, same woman, different eyes. What stared back at her wasn't guilt alone, it was disbelief. How had she come to this? Marcus didn't answer her calls. His silence was immediate, decisive. Whatever had existed between them evaporated the moment her secret stopped being thrilling. He had taken what he wanted and left without ceremony. Days bled into nights. She stopped eating, stopped working. The phone became both lifeline and torment, glowing with new messages she couldn't resist reading. Some from strangers, some from men whose names she barely remembered. All of them shallow echoes of what she once mistook for intimacy. She realized then that she had never been searching for love, only for attention, a mirror that told her she still mattered. But attention is fleeting, and once it fades, all that remains is the sound of your own emptiness. One evening, she sat in the dark, phone in hand, thumb hovering over another message from another man. The words were simple, "You up?" Her reflection appeared on the screen, pale and tired, eyes rimmed with regret. She thought of David's quiet heartbreak, of Marcus's fading smile, of every moment she'd traded for an illusion of worth. Then she put the phone down. For the first time in months, she didn't reply. Outside, rain began to fall, steady and unrelenting, washing against the windows like absolution she didn't deserve. Samantha closed her eyes, letting the sound fill the silence, unsure whether she'd learned anything at all.